In the garden of lawyers' professional life, there are three wasps that sting the most. High stress, balancing family with work, and time management. That's according to years of member surveys from the Florida bar, but are these stings really exclusive to lawyers? According to widely available figures, it seems that doctors, nurses, realtors all face similar challenges. Is it really different for lawyers, or do lawyers just think it's different for them? Well, you don't know what it's like to run a law firm, or a PT clinic, or a medical office, a pie shop, dog walker, truck driver, grave digger, clown college, dental art school, witness protection. Of the bar members who replied that they are dissatisfied with their legal careers, the top three sources of dissatisfaction were not enough business, salary, and job burnout. Too much work, but not enough business. Can this be interpreted as their time is being occupied by something other than the practice of law? Inside every small business is someone slowly going insane. Is the law firm any different? Let's find out.
LAWsome, the podcast for law firms. Powered by Consultwebs.
Welcome back to LAWsome, the podcast for law firms that looks at people walking around eating ice cream in the middle of the day like, why? We're here to inform, educate, and entertain the legal audience in the latest of personal and professional development. I'm Jake Sanders, and with me is Paul Julius. Paul, do you eat ice cream in the middle of the day?
Oh, yeah.
You do?
No,
you don't. No, you don't.
I will.
Is that true?
If I happen to be wandering past the fridge and, it's an option. I will say it depends on the flavor, though. Like,
Wow.
I don't do Rocky Road in the middle of the day. Or
See, that's what
chip.
I'm just trying to say. It seems like it's a treat thing, and maybe you have the treat later, or you have it on the weekend, or under a bush, or hiding in somewhere. Like, not that I have experience enjoying treats in hidden locations, but the point is, it's just like everybody's business for you to watch. I'm just watching you have a good treat, and they're like licking the ice cream, and it's just like, I just want to smack it out of their hand. Is that you? Is that me?
It's you. It's just you.
What's on the show?
On the show today, we talk about why law firms fail. Happy? Stick with us, folks. I swear to God, this gets better. With an article from the Huffington Post and a hot take side dish from Carolyn Elephant. And we take a dive into a recent Bar Association survey to identify some common pain points lawyers all share, both personally and professionally, and see if maybe the solution to these problems are lurking below the surface. And then we can break into Michael Gerber's book E-Myth on our first ever LAWsome Bookclub.
Pull up a plate. It's the Hot Takes Buffet.
The link today is oddly from the Huffington Post. It's Why Law Firms Fail by Frank Wu. This was like a paragraph long.
Contributor.
Frank Wu, contributor.
Another contributor.
And he only gave us a couple paragraphs. He's like, I'll tell you why. And then he kind of said why. And then he left.
Yeah, he threw a couple rocks and ran away. It was strange.
And it was like, but he did talk about talent isn't enough to get you there. Just sort of like relying on the best quality service is not enough. Is basically the takeaway. And there's nothing, frankly unique about that, but it was interesting. It says here, law firms fail for many reasons. Among them is not one that might be expected. Very few, if any, of the law firms that have failed have foundered because the people employed there were lousy lawyers. So you got great lawyers, good staff, people who can do the gig. That's not the reason why. So then what is the reason why? What's this second article we linked to by Carolyn Elephant?
So Carolyn's thing is
what's the title?
It's called Why Startups Fail is Also Why Solo and Small Law Firms Fail.
Bam, headline right there. Now we're listening.
Part of it is lack of market need. Part of it is strong competition.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it is financial reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what she says. And she gives examples. Lack of market need. She's suggesting that LegalZoom, Rocket Lawyer
mm-hmm.
are, swiping a big portion of that market away.
Mm-hmm.
Strong competition. Obviously, anybody who listens to this you understand that legal is one of the most competitive verticals there is, whether you're doing, TV,
It's expensive.
AdWords, anything.
Yep.
It's expensive and it's tough.
Yep.
And financial reasons like cash flow problems, issues with pricing.
Mm-hmm.
I think I like that she lists this third, because I would say this is a distant third probably for most lawyers. I don't know anybody who ran out of business because they rented too big of an office.
Just in a giant mansion alone.
Yeah, I would say though it's interesting that she says this stuff. I can only think of a couple law firms, and I'll say firms in air quotes here, that closed up shop. And when I say firms, it was typically smaller, maybe solos or maybe a couple people,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't even really go out of business. They just kind of it was almost like they were working, using an office in another firm's space, and they just sort of like, hell with it, I'm just joining up with these people. It's too much easier. I can't really say that I can even think of anybody I know that straight up failed.
It's not like disappearing or like extinction. It's just like you evaporate into kind of the static, the legal static.
It's not like all of a sudden you're not a lawyer anymore.
So Paul, you recently had interactions with a lawyer who is solo, right?
Yeah.
So in working on contract stuff, you were closing down the house. Speak to this. Like, what was that lawyer's experience in regards to these things, and how does that translate to the kind of theme?
Right. So, yeah, as anybody knows who's closed a house, this was a kind of a private deal. So we didn't have a lot of realtors or brokers or anything in there.
Cameras.
It was just myself and yeah, exactly. And it was. I swear to God, it was a
legit
house deal. I wasn't sitting in lockup
now
talking in the drunk tank
already now. Yeah.
But it was interesting to me because this lawyer, I've known him for a long time, and we've never really discussed marketing or anything like that. What he knows, what I do. He knows the company I work for, and it's completely not applicable to him or his firm. And it's not that they don't really do a lot of personal injury. They don't do criminal cases. They don't do family law. But they don't really need any advertising. They have such a strong referral network, word of mouth, all this stuff. So a lot of this marketing stuff, like we don't really talk about. But it was interesting to me some of the things that did come up that seemed to me to be a common concern. Contingency versus flat rate. Getting a retainer, e-document stuff. Being able to take bigger cases because you're able to do e-discovery now. These are things that are kind of universal. Right. And it's interesting that some of these things, it kind of clicked with me that relate to this bar association survey that we have where it's he's successful. I'll say that straight up. I know. I mean, I've been to his house.
Right. It's nice.
The dude's not struggling at all.
You rode on his train.
That's right. That's right. It's beautiful. But I will say this. Train. The top three things that it says the three most significant challenges, concerns you personally face as an attorney.
Oh yeah, this is the Florida bar membership survey. By the way. Yeah.
High stress, balancing family and work, and time management.
Mm-hmm.
Those are 1, 2, and 3. I mean,
stress.
within 7 to 10% of each other, almost split 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. Everything else that comes after that is just
a big and down is like client expectations, lack of business, net revenue. Like personally, it's not a concern. That was an interesting thing to see.
You're right. Billable hours is fourth from the bottom of the list.
Right.
I mean, so it's kind of funny that's not necessarily what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But these kind of things are common to every lawyer, I guess. And in our conversation, some of these things, it was like, it's difficult to handle this situation because we are concerned about making money here, and therefore it's difficult to manage our time.
Mhm.
And because we haven't managed our time well, we are now spending more hours in the office, which means we haven't seen our family as much as we'd like to,
Mhm.
which is stressful because now I've got too much work and I got obligations I have to meet with my family, and I'm coming in on Saturday. You know, not that this guy's unhappy, and I think he actually, given the framework of this survey, I think manages it better than many of the people responding to the survey. These percentages are there,
Mhm.
but it's real. I mean, it's real. These things are real. And the problem is that you're a lawyer. You can't just say, man, whatever, I could punt for a couple days and, I can call in sick and the judge will understand if I don't show up to pretrial motions.
Right.
Like, no, man, you got to go.
And I think one of the inverse parts of this Florida membership opinion survey from the bar was that lower on the totem pole is keeping up with new technology, and higher on the totem pole of social media and every seminar you go to is like technology, and all the vendors are telling you all of these things, all these options. And I mean, even Carolyn Elephant's talking about what's available. She really embraces, mobile meetings. She doesn't have one place, is very successful in the way that she's, the work she's done at My Shingle and her law office. But at the bottom of the article is the most important part, because she says it's about passion, and starting a law firm requires significant effort, and running a firm isn't a piece of cake, either with demanding clients, hostile judges, and rude opposing counsel to deal with on a daily basis. If you don't love your work so much that it makes you want to dance a jig, then mustering up the energy for the drudgery and stress that running a firm entails will be next to impossible. It's interesting because it isn't about the abilities or the tech fixes or what you should be aware of. It's that your stress in time management and trying to get your family, balanced, which is everybody's, is the same problem that small startup businesses are experiencing. And that's why Carolyn's saying it's about not just the passion to drive the business, but the passion to understand it on a holistic level. And that's why when we talk about Michael Gerber's E-Myth, it drives into all of these things. It says, if you're talking about the stress that comes from running a law firm, it is related to the problems of every business owner. So what common ground can we find, and how can we take some of those, revelatory moments that save businesses and bring them to the law firm,
Well, and I'm gonna throw a couple stones of my own here, because I would also argue that for lawyers it's a little bit different, because this is what you went to school for.
Mm-hmm.
This is what you're certified. You took an oath.
Mm-hmm.
This is what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be a lawyer. So there's this voice in the back of your head where, this is who I am. This is what I do.
Mm-hmm.
So if this business isn't working, it means I failed. And that's what we're trying to say, is that no, these two articles, what they're saying, why law firms fail, it's not because you aren't a good lawyer. There are other things there that you have to be good at that maybe you didn't learn in law school, or maybe it's an attitude about business, or how you run your business, or how you systemize things,
or feel passionate about certain things, like Mike Whalen's, and even go back to some of the beginning episodes about what are you passionate about? Nick Pavlidis was like, imagine the practice you want, Dina Eisenberg said, so it's like all these voices are coming not from us, but from a chorus of people. And I think your point is like everyone, and this is your hesitation going into this, was everyone knows that they need to be this, that, and everyone knows that there's tech fixes. And so telling people about it is stupid, because who are you to give people advice? But the point is that this advice is bigger. And Michael Gerber talks about it in a bigger way, because it isn't about your lawyering. Just like Frank Wu said, it's not about you being a bad lawyer that this law firm fails. And it's about this adaptive mindset. So anyone can get in on this. And the book that we go to later talks about it. I think we find some really good revelations, but it is a common core, which is our theme here, I think, perennially on the show, is that at a reductive level, the business problems that you face can be addressed from multiple different perspectives. And so one of those perspectives is Michael Gerber's E-Myth, and we're going to dig into it.
Let's go.
Let's go!
Stay tuned as we continue on a very special episode of LAWsome. Do you like to read books? Would you rather someone else do the reading? Well, Jake and Paul read a book, and now you have to hear about it. It's the LAWsome Book Report.
Today's book is The E-Myth Revisited: Why Most Small Businesses Don't Work and What to Do About It by Michael Gerber. Let's learn more about the book from Paul before we discuss it.
An instant classic, this revised and updated edition of the phenomenal bestseller dispels the myths about starting your own business. Small business consultant and author Michael E. Gerber, with sharp insight gained from years of experience, points out how common assumptions, expectations, and even technical expertise can get in the way of running a successful business. Gerber walks you through the steps in the life of a business, from entrepreneurial infancy through adolescent growing pains to the mature entrepreneurial perspective, the guiding light of all businesses that succeed, and shows how to apply the lessons of franchising to any business, whether or not it is a franchise. Most importantly, Gerber draws the vital, often overlooked distinction between working on your business and working in your business. But don't take my word for it. Go pick up the book and see for yourself at your local library. Jake, why is this on the podcast?
Well, Paul, both me and you have read this book, and it struck me as relatable to the LAWsome audience because as small business owners, people working at law firms understand the problems that are existing at every small business, which is getting good quality workers, people who care, getting processes in place that, you can depend on. So in regards to the specific problems of running a law firm, I didn't see a distinction in between the problems of a small business and the firm. So the lessons here, just like we spoke earlier in the intro about why small businesses fail, why law firms fail, there is common cause here. And Michael Gerber has great insight, and I thought it would be a great thing to share with everybody.
Yeah, I agree. I read this book a long time ago, and there's some things in here that really changed my attitude towards not only conducting business, but how I understood how other people conducted their business. And an interesting side effect was just empathy. Like I could see, and we'll get into the different parts of, and the kind of the different stages of growth, which I think are very important. I think it's going to be kind of eye opening particularly for lawyers to understand how they're getting pushed, particularly in the tech sector. You got to be this entrepreneur. You got to push this stuff out. But within this framework that Michael Gerber lays out, sometimes that doesn't really fit for some of these different professional pursuits. But it's interesting to understand how these things can work for you.
So the E-Myth is the idea that only entrepreneurs start and launch successful businesses. And in our culture, I think there is a lot of focus on the creative brains that birth these amazing, companies. And they come from this dedicated, maniacal person, and they dominate industries and stuff like that. And the reality of the situation is most business owners are technicians who know how to do a trade or a craft, and then they decide to open up a shingle. Sounds very familiar to lawyers and law firms. And it's actually the only way that they can work, considering bar associations that unauthorized practice of law, you can't run a law firm unless you're a lawyer. So lawyers coming out of law school, having some business acumen or not, just being technicians of the law, have to start their law firms. And there's nothing particular about that in regards to business owners. So you're a technician, you really like, in the book, they talk about this lady who likes to bake pie. She's like the best cherry pie maker, and she loved making pie, and she was the best. And when she went into it, she started her business, and it started to become overwhelming, and she couldn't focus on the pie making because she was getting eaten alive. And so going into past what the E-myth is, Gerber explains to this poor pie lady that there are 3 personalities in a business owner. And one of them is the entrepreneur. The other is the technician. And then the other is the manager. And so, Paul, what's your distinction on those personalities, and what do you have to say about that stuff?
This was some of the most meaningful portions of the book. I highly recommend this part of it. There's a lot of other stuff in here about systems and things like that. It's an interesting read, but to me, like, this is almost like the Myers-Briggs personality thing, or whatever you might do, because I think you may be operating at one level, but in the mindset of a different level. So to break it down, you have the entrepreneur, like I think you spoke very eloquently to earlier. That's your Elon Musk,
right? The dreamer,
your Richard, the guys who are just like, I wonder if I can do that. But the important thing about that is that they're still able to take that step. They're still willing to take that leap. There's not only someone who can conceive of this thing, but they're also not so risk averse that it just dies on the vine. So there is that kind of entrepreneur. You're dreaming and risking, and it definitely sets you apart a little bit. But then there's the technician. That's kind of the next stage, where part of that entrepreneur is that you have, what's your hook? What are you doing? So you can do something that other people can't do, or you can do it better or different.
And one part in the book that's amazing about the technician not knowing that they launched this business and it's dependent upon them.
Yes.
Rather than being their greatest single asset, knowing the technical work of their business becomes their greatest single liability.
Absolutely.
So all I know how to do is law. All I know how to be is technically doing these things in regards to running a business, in regards to administrating things, in regards to leaning towards the future, in regards to opening up ourselves to dreaming. We have to be able to balance these things. And I think it's interesting that the technician, which he points out, the majority of people who start a business are overwhelmingly technicians and less entrepreneurs, and then even less managers. So everyone's got, the technical skills to launch the business. They're worried about if they have the cutting edge aspect of it, but the manager is the last aspect. And Paul, you at your company, when you were doing machine working and stuff, when you were the manager, even like the topmost thing, where were you at? Were you more of a manager? Were you more of a technician? Were you more of an entrepreneur? What is the manager aspect of this? Because I think that was hard for me to understand, because I'm so not the manager.
I didn't understand it at the time. And it wasn't until I got this book. And I think a lot of lawyers, I want to go back a little bit and kind of look at this from what you just said, because you made a really good point, is that you as a technician build a business around what you can do. And I think the step to being a manager is saying, I have built this business where I can do what I do in, right? So you have created yourself an environment where you can excel at what you are technically an expert at, as opposed to being technically an expert and grabbing this and that and whatever. I'm making these pies, or I'm, building computers out of my garage. And I'm trying to just hand to mouth, bill comes in, money comes in, I build it out, I send it out, without ever having some kind of perspective and saying, how am I going to flourish? And that's what we're really talking about here, is taking that entrepreneurial idea and planting it and growing it and being able to do what you love. You may not love accounting. I found that out. I didn't like having to call customers and, hassle them to pay their past due accounts. It was part of the business, but without having a kind of that manager's perspective, I didn't understand that without doing this or without putting a system into place to make this happen, it inhibited me from doing what I loved about starting the company in the first place.
And it's not just discrete people who are bringing these type of roles. These roles exist inside our head, and at varying degrees. I think basically Gerber attaches the personalities to temporal, like time frames, and he says the entrepreneur lives in the future, the manager lives in the past, and the technician lives in the present. So, like, you each want to be the boss, but none of them wants to have a boss. So you have to realize the limitations of these things. And you have to realize that maybe you're more dominant. Maybe you are more of the technician. Maybe you are more of that manager or that entrepreneur. But you have to blend it, because if you're just a technician, you'll work until you drop. And if you're just a manager, you'll just check and mark boxes endlessly and think about the status quo and what was and precedent and stuff. And if you're just an entrepreneur, you're going to die in a rocket collision or something. Like, it's going to be dramatic.
You never execute anything.
You never execute anything. And what you said is about how can you flourish the business and how can you work on it and not inside of it. And that's where Gerber talks about evolving, and he talks about the maturity phase, taking it from infancy to, this kind of thinking like a franchise. So let's go into the next part of this book, turnkey modeling, franchise thinking. That was a big part of this book that really spoke to me in regards to law firms, in regards to getting systems together, getting processes. Colin has said something about this.
At the end of the day, if you just simply apply a shiny piece of tech to something, it may end up creating a new problem, exacerbating an existing problem, or at the very least won't solve your existing problem. What you need to do is you have to take a process-oriented approach and look at the process that has the problem, look at the problem within the process, and then figure out, okay, how do we want to solve this problem?
Kat Moon has said something about this.
Well, I think human-centered design just gives us more tools. The process, the mindsets, simply additional tools, and they're not necessarily the right tools for every problem. So I think part of doing good work is understanding what tools you have at your disposal and which are best suited based on the problem or challenge in front of you.
All of our previous guests have talked about understanding your processes inside your law firm, and that's the way you can fix it.
And you've been in a law firm.
Right. And that's the other thing.
You implemented processes. I mean, this is where we can talk about, this is something where all this kind of preachy talk and theoretical stuff about this book gets very real very quick. And I think, Jake, you have, I'm sure you can give examples of something that you put in. Crisis management, negative reviews.
Yes.
Stuff like that. I mean, these are things where, what's your criteria for a process that a law firm could put into place that would kind of fit in with this franchise model?
And that's why I think you need to realize that if you ask for help, you're going to survive. If you realize you have these problems, and we talked about this, another thing is just realizing that you have the problems is the first step. Then understanding your different types of personalities, where you're at in the business maturity process. In regards to thinking like a franchise or getting a process started, this book was amazing because it alleviated me of all my concerns. It was like, the reason why your hair's on fire is because you're sitting next to the campfire or something, and you're like, yes, I have been feeling very flamey. But it was great because a lot of our clients, our law firm clients, are lamenting about staff, about how they can't get good quality workers, about how they just keep putting out fires. The problem is they don't have an expert system in place. And so when Gerber's talking about thinking like a franchise, he's talking about not just fixing your business for its sake, but imagine if you were going to sell your law firm to someone else. Imagine if you were going to sell your business to someone else, your sandwich shop, your pie shop, your whatever, your train hobby modeling shop, whatever it is. If you acted like someone was going to come in here and acquire the company, you would create systems in place, and it would be dependent on the systems and not the people running them. And so one of the things that I discovered when you're talking about processes is that it has to be something that the people fall into and not that they prop up. Because one of the best parts was he's talking about McDonald's. You can go to McDonald's with zero skills and know how to make a hamburger that comes directly out the same way, the same time, no matter where you are in Beijing or Baltimore. Someone with a reading degree of whatever can go in there and do this. And the reason why is not because it's an extraordinary person. It's because the system is extraordinary. And so you have to start thinking about the systems in place and how you can get them set up, because that alleviates the fire. That brings the quality out of people rather than expecting and demanding. And that's the best part about systems dependent rather than expert dependent. Like you really, really want someone that's really, really good at their job, to do that. But then if that person leaves, then you have lost everything. I mean, if anybody has worked in a law firm or has worked in a business, there is some person that's been there for years that knows everything, that just knows the processes and understands. And then if that person leaves or is sick or whatever, it's thrown into chaos, and you didn't know what you had until it's gone. And so just working in a place where it's, a whole bunch of people, you have to think and respect the processes, because that's the only way it's going to succeed. And that's why Gerber is talking about, ordinary people falling into an extraordinary system. And that's the stuff that blows my mind. That's so exciting. But when you realize what you had to do. So to go back to your question, what was it like doing the online reputation management? It was hard to get the people involved, but I had to remove the barriers. I had to understand what people were dealing with. I had to use empathy. I had to use all of the different type of personalities. I have to be creative. I have to be firm. I have to be direct. And after a while, it just kept working, and no one thought about it at all because it just melded into the background. So these things seem crazy. And it seems like you're lifting up a huge boulder, but the minute you get it up in the air, it doesn't come rolling back. It just floats away because it's now a part of the process. And that's that Gerber thing that just blew my pants off, that I'm pretty sure the book starts in every business. There is a person going crazy. And that's it. In every small business, there is someone slowly losing their minds. And why? And
I think you're right. And I think there's even making it a little bit more real. If we're talking about a business that you built up around yourself, you want to take a vacation. We see a lot of lawyers are worried about work-life balance. This is what we're talking about here. This is a very real thing where you need to be able to step out of that. If I'm not in the office, nothing gets done and no one makes money kind of mindset.
Which is so pervasive everywhere.
Well, exactly. It's not just lawyers.
Everywhere.
But I think it's kind of weird that lawyers can never really get out of that mindset because you went to school for this. I am going to go and practice law. I'm not going to make a franchise of law firms. But what you need to do is take a look at these things and say, hey, is there a way I can maybe systemize the stuff that takes me away from doing that?
So he gives this 6-point checklist for how to get this system together. You just imagine that your law firm is cloned and you have 5,000 law firms exactly like it. So this is the 6-point thing that Gerber says that you need to make sure your model has. So 1, the model will over-deliver value to customers, employees, suppliers, and lenders. Step 2, the model will be operated by the lowest skill level possible. A salamander can walk in and do this. Number 3, the model is impeccable and orderly. 4, there's an operations manual. 5, predictable service to the customer. 6, uniform color, dress, and facilities. It's interesting because it looks like marketing. It looks like business strategy. It looks like advertising. It looks like a lot of things, but that's pretty intense. And that's describing what you'll need to have a successful business. Because if you're not, you're just running around the different personality types, banging your head against the different abilities or disabilities you have. And in regards to this, let's go next level. Here we are. I can create an expert system. I've understood my personality types. This book, does it apply today, Paul Julius?
Yes, it does.
Okay, good. Thank God.
Yeah. And that's it, folks. Thanks for stopping by.
We'll see you later.
Go to the library and check out the book. Well, I think to go through this list that you just talked about, I mean, if you want to get a little bit above that, and I think this was another thing that's important about this book, even though this book was written in 1995,
right?
That those 6 steps you just talked about force you to not think about you. And I think that's very difficult in these things where people are starting business, where they're an entrepreneur, where they're doing IT work, web design, things that you can freelance. And then you get into these more professional services like a CPA, like a lawyer, stuff like that, where, you are the business, but you need to step back and think about some things. And you said it really great, because this is going to be the foundation for your brand. This is the thing that's going to define that stuff, because this is how other people are going to perceive you. And this is where you start to take advantage of it. How do you answer the phone? How do other people at your business answer the phone? How do they dress? What does your lobby look like? Do you have a lobby? How do you follow up with people? I mean, these are all things where you can systemize this. And I love that thing where it says the lowest skill level. You shouldn't have to be hiring people with a law degree to do your intake.
One of the biggest things was just getting resume after resume of people just who couldn't cut the mustard. And then you realize that the qualifications you're putting out there are way too crazy. You don't need this. You don't need to have somebody who has all of that. You need to have a certain type of personality. Hire someone who's tenacious, who has loyalty. So it's a different type of hiring mentality right there that does not go towards, does it check the box? Do they have the things? Well, they don't have the things. Well, I'm not even looking at them. Well, actually, that might not be the answer. What was one of the things Patrick Pallas said? One of the things he did at his law firm was stop hiring lawyers. He was hiring outside of the legal profession, hiring people who could bring different perspectives to building his law firm. That alone right there is interesting, because that goes to show, I'm going to have to be delivering this to people other than me. So it also breaks up that E-myth, rather than saying like, there's a limit to this entrepreneurial spirit. It can only take you so far.
There's different levels of it.
Regardless.
To get back to your question, is this what's changed?
Yes.
Is this book still relevant?
1995.
So 1995, I think that's the interesting point you just brought up about qualifications. I think level of education may not necessarily be as indicative of competence level as it was back in 1995. There's a lot of people with master's degrees who don't have jobs.
Right.
The market is very different. So those kind of things I think that you just talked about are very important. You can't just be like, well, if you have a, MBA in, business management and client services, stuff like that, you're probably going to be a good fit. Like, you're going to go on LinkedIn and get 4,000 applications if you put something that general up. So I think there's that. I think there's kind of that. I think that's where it's changed a bit, but I still think having something in mind of the right fit is important. But something that's really changed is that there are so many cloud-based services now. You and I had talked earlier about, and we've done an episode on apps, smartphones. And to think about that, back in 1995, maybe you had QuickBooks, or God, what was the other one? Lotus. I think was one.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I'm digging, man. You had Bob Cratchit scratching away.
Yeah, the poor houses. You had a bit of the plague going around. No, but you're right. You have a computer in your pants.
and the thing is, it can handle it right now. If you are going to make a court appearance and you have to stop for gas, you can Apple Pay the gas and go into your QuickBooks app and log in exactly what expense that should go to right there, like while you're pumping gas.
Well, and imagine in the future when you could have, and they're working on this, things that track your phone or your browser or the way you're using your computer and correlates it automatically to your calendar and timesheets, and actually looks at the way you behave and work and bills your time accordingly, like based on camera movements or we're headed there. We're headed to the place where this stuff can just be automated, where I can just set an appointment, auto remind, texts going in and out, receive and send out, payments. I can give documents over by photo. It can turn it into a PDF. I can text, email to text, things that weren't possible. But regardless,
like Dan Smith said, we can use Alexa to track time now.
Right.
Alexa, log 0.6 hours for opening the Johnson email.
And here's the thing. It's a long email. Never mind.
I was gonna say.
No. Anyway,
it was an awful choice of. Yeah.
The point was, regardless that there's so much more tools, it still doesn't make the ability inside of your head stronger or weaker. It probably weakens you because let me just give you a counter argument. Safety considerations in auto driving, cameras, lane departure detection, a lot of those things that give you warnings and beeps and rear view detectors and stuff like that actually make drivers more lazy. Actually gets them less engaged in the art of defensive driving, good driving amongst the people that you're sharing the road with. They're relying on their tech to a dangerous point where they're blindsided to their own abilities to react and respond to the stimulus of the immediate environment. Point being, y'all can have all this great stuff, but it still doesn't mean that you are going to use your brain and apply it appropriately. And the only way you could apply it appropriately is if you got a system in place. And the only way you could get a system in place is realize which personality function you come with. And then how do you drive value for your clients? And then how do you get processes and the help in place to make it happen? So Michael Gerber doesn't end this book in a way like sign me up or pay me to come and speak. When we're talking about this myth of the entrepreneur, the myth of the super person, it's actually speaking to a larger cultural trend that leaves room for a lot to be desired. And as I think a lot of people see employment opportunities shrinking because this technology is increasing, but people aren't really sure how to use it. And the people with most access and ability can use it. And then those will sort of take the Darwinian approach and those people will evolve while the other people won't. Gerber's talking about core, common relationship stuff that you need to come to grips with that make a better business. And that business makes the world a better place. And if you don't do it, you're actually making the world a worse place. People don't want to show up to your job if they're not happy. You don't want to be here because you're not happy. Your hair's on fire. So the advice isn't necessarily to show you what is missing, but it's to show you what's possible when you realize what's inside and what matters to you. And that's why I wanted to talk about this book with you, because you brought this book up to me originally and you said, dude, this book changed my life. And it's because up until that point when you had read it, you were just going crazy.
Well, I was driven, and you just made an excellent point, but I was driven. I was getting carried along by the flow of the river.
Right.
To put it instead of being in a raft and guiding myself where I wanted to go.
Or swimming.
And that's,
yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm talking about. And I think that's what I would hope that lawyers can look at this book and, maybe peel out of there, is that you're in a unique profession.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of in this area between medical doctor and auto mechanic and, something else.
Literature, history professor,
And then you have these, and researcher. I mean, there's a lot of different things where, but what it comes down to too is that you have to put your signature on that document. So you can't just outsource stuff. It's not necessarily that point, and I was the same way. Like, even if you're talking about manufacturing, being a mechanic, what's important about this and why I think it's important for law firms and lawyers is at least to be aware of the fact that there are parts of your business, particularly now, with the cloud-based stuff, various software, stuff like that free you from being a slave to and being pushed around by the things that keep you from going bankrupt. And that's where it's at. And that's what I mean, is that you need to get this attitude where, anybody who's ever woken up in the middle of the night going, oh my God, what have I done? I can't get out of this. I'm trapped. I'm freaking trapped. I don't know. I don't want to go into work tomorrow because 50% of the stuff I have to deal with, I don't want to deal with. I wanted to be a machinist. I wanted to be a musician. I wanted to be a lawyer. And as it is, I'm stuck hassling people for, past due invoices, or people are calling me wondering where their work is because I couldn't get to it because I spent 50% of my time hassling people for late invoices. And it just perpetually feeds on it. This book will help you get into the right mindset to stop that. And that's what changes it. That's what changes everything.
So to end, he has this point at the last point, and I took a note on it because I thought it was so amazing, because he ended in a really huge cultural splash, and it was about business and it's about focusing and marketing and managing. But then at the end, he made it about spirituality, and he made it about something bigger, because in the end, we are our jobs. We are the things that we've decided to pursue. But he says this: you won't rediscover your spirit in your past. Your spirit is ahead of you. To be sure, it will be anything but certain. But that's what's exciting. Because the future of this, working on your business, rather than inside of it, is the path of constant engagement. And he says this, and he's like, let's not be foolish. Thus freedom, this freedom that we're talking about, that Paul's talking about, is not just a matter of saying yes or no to a specific decision. It is the power to mold and create ourselves. Freedom is the capacity to become what we truly are. It's not just about saying, yes, I want to, relieve my stress, or yes, I want to go into the future, or yes, I want to do this. It's actually about saying you're going to be constantly engaged, but what you're headed towards is what you create. And what you're leaving behind is what everybody else was creating for you, all the chaos, all the nonsense, and where people told you where you could take your law degree or your business degree. Actually, what's ahead of you is that not just yes or no, not just positive or negative, but it's constant engagement, and it's this working on it. And that's where the path is. And there's actual enlightenment there, and there's benefit there. And it's not just you that'll feel it, because you're doing it with your company. You're making everybody come with you. And Chris Licurdo talked about it. It's not about leading. It's about creating something that we can all follow. So that's the point. And that's the myth that's dispelled in this book. And that's the LAWsome truth.
Yeah. Well, and that's what he says at the end too. And I love that quote. And I love what he says. It's a call to arms, not to battle, but to learning. Dude. And he says that the world isn't in chaos, we are in chaos. And it really reminded me of this quote from Jack Sparrow.
Yes.
In Pirates of the Caribbean, where he says, the problem isn't the problem. Your attitude about the problem is the problem.
But you know what? Don't take our word for it.
No.
go get the book yourself.
For show notes, links, and info, go to thelawsomepodcast.com or follow us on Twitter or Facebook. Be sure to leave us a review and rating in iTunes or wherever you find the you listen to. Until next week, stay lawsome.